good morning, everyone. And thanks for joining us in person and virtually. Hopefully, all you can hear me well. Okay, great. So before I hand over to the person who we are here to see and to hear speak about this project, I wanted to share with you how this project really came about. I wanted to, apologies, wrong click. Yeah, right. And I want to tell you how our EV aspirations really started taking shape in reality. Just to give you a heads up, there is something downstairs if you haven't seen it already, but I hope you got a chance to stop by and explore 3 very different electric vehicles that are parked right outside in the courtyard. One of which is actively taking part in the project that we'll cover in a few minutes, but all 3 are really trusted soldiers in the ongoing energy revolution. So a bit of context before we jump into the details of the project. Last year, 200,000 electric vehicles were registered in the UK. As per National Grid's future energy scenarios, to meet our carbon commitment by 2030, or in just 9 years, we need to have between 3 and 6 million. That is 30 to 65 times where we are today. By 2050, that number must be almost 150 times higher where we are today. Achieving such transition is challenging under the best of circumstances. So we started asking ourselves a number of questions. We started by asking ourselves, what does a corporate customer need to confidently make the strategic decision to electrify their whole fleet? On one hand, there is already a lot going on for the EVs. There is strong social, corporate, government support for an EV rollout. So in theory, a decision to electrify your whole fleet should be a welcome one. The economics are also starting to look promising. Between falling EV costs, generous tax breaks, and low maintenance costs, replacing your old fleet with EVs is starting to look more and more like a no-brainer. Lastly, with constantly increasing battery density and growing infrastructure, range anxiety is quickly becoming a thing from the past. But there are a lot of practical concerns on the ground, we found out. Can your network connection support the charging demand for your fleet? If you invest further into on-site storage and generation, will all these new assets work in an orchestrated way right alongside your normal business operations? Do you have the optimal tariff? Or do you have a special tariff for your EV consumption alone? What kind of charger fits your infrastructure and the business needs? So these are just a few of the questions that needed to be answered to avoid unforeseen costs or disappointed stakeholders later on. We knew that we need to reconcile positive macro trends, such as these, what we're seeing here, with the reality on the ground. We thought that the only way we can develop a proposition that works on paper and in reality is if we look deeper into the nexus between energy, automotive, and customer operations. What was clear from the start is that to develop a successful EV proposition, we'll have to look at things a lot more holistically. We needed an integrated solution that does not ignore how much power you can use at any given time, doesn't overlook the shape of the energy tariff, or miss an opportunity to charge from on-site solar, for example. We need a solution that is complementary to the way the business is run and also utilizes any flexibility on site. We need a solution that recognizes that EVs are quite different than our petrol and diesel cars. EVs are inherently flexible, and with the right tools, they could play a central role, not only in achieving net zero operations by your business, but also be an integral part of the energy revolution. So our shareholder Marubeni was in a unique position to own a turnkey installation and funding arm of the business, an energy supplier, and an automotive investment company with a number of dealerships. With their help and generous funding, thank you for that, SmartestEnergy were able to join hands with Marubeni, Norton Way, Verta, Origami, and Grid Edge in a partnership that is looking to design, develop, and deploy an EV proposition that not only allows the business to electrify their fleet, but also is able to leverage the many synergies of a more holistic and integrated solution. In the center of this integrated solution is Grid Edge. I'm not bright enough to pretend to know what all the clever things that Jim is doing, but he's here to tell you about it all. So I'll pass on to him in a second.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Buzz. Where are we? Yeah, thank you very much, Buzz. Hello, everybody. So I'm Jim Scott. I'm the Chief Product Officer for Grid Edge. And like Buzz said, I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the things that we're starting to learn, having I suppose put a spade in the ground around this energy transition that we know is coming our way and is coming into the urban environment increasingly, and we're starting to really see being pulled into our industry by customers as they ask for net zero, and we all try and wrap our heads around exactly what that means. And I suppose I'm also going to try and give us a bit of a framework for thinking about how we can think about the next steps and what the lessons that we're learning at the moment really mean for us. So Grid Edge, first up, we're a fairly small, fairly new company. We are a startup with all of the things that comes with and entails. We're based in Birmingham, and we're actually a spin out from a university up in Birmingham as well. So we've been going for about 4 years. A lot more of us now than are on this photo. There's about 30 of us now, and we've been growing quite rapidly at our startups. And we are a data science company. When we talk to investors, we say we're an AI company. We work in the urban environment and the built environment, and we work with principally building operators, I suppose, but people that own and operate built environment assets. And one of the big things that we've started working and we've noticed is that they are, as they go towards net zero, electrifying those assets, and they're worrying about what they feel like in the future, and they come to us for these questions. And that future's just as Buzz just described. You think about that chart, right, from 0 to 30 million vehicles in 5 years. It's an extraordinary transition. When I got into energy, my first boss in the energy industry said, energy's ace, it's recession proof. Nothing ever changes. It gets to just burn gas, generate electricity. It's easy. And he was kind of right. But as far as I can tell, it changes about every 5 years. So what we've sort of noticed is about 5 years ago, for our customers, winning was really all about cost reduction. And what that meant was switching stuff off that shouldn't be on, switching your heating off during the night, switching your lights off that you don't need during the day. That was kind of it. It was largely lighting and HVAC, and it was all about energy efficiency. And we definitely see them moving towards a much more complex combination of building loads and EV loads and on-site generation. Like I said, trying to understand what net zero really means for their businesses. And winning starts to mean something a little bit more complex, something around CO2 as well as cost, investment and the return on it, and long-term sustainability. And they don't know the answer, but they all say net zero all the time. And it's really interesting to see things like the Festival of Net Zero, suddenly it's in Canary Wharf, right? Unimaginable in 2012, say. I think what we think is really key to that is a holistic view of these buildings and the assets inside them, not just looking just at an offer around batteries plus a tariff, or not just looking just at an offer around electric vehicles plus a charging schedule or something, but combining them all together, making them interoperate together. And that's the big lesson that I think we can learn out of this Norton Way demonstration. How do we make these things sing, play a tune together that works for the customer? So on the customer, this is the site as Buzz introduced. It's a combination of loads there. There's a lot of solar generation. It overspills a lot onto the grid. It has got what we call a distribution network operator constraint, a DNO constraint. That's where they're not allowed to overspill too much to the grid, basically, and they're also not allowed to draw too much from the grid or they get penalized. That's all energy side stuff. Really, the reason this shed was built in Letchworth was to sell cars. Yeah, that's it. All they do every day is sell cars. Build a great big glass shed, put cars in it, sell them. They're not a power station. They're not even a virtual power station. They're nowhere near, and they don't care. They care about, they get paid for selling more cars, and that's the end of it. And they very, very generously, with maybe a small nudge from Marubeni, have been willing to participate in our work to help us try to understand what the transition means for the energy sector and its consumers, because it's not one or the other, it's together. It is fortunately full of lovely people, which we'll come on to in a minute. If you've come along to the V2G talk but don't know what V2G unit is, there's one just here, says V2G on it. Doesn't really mean vehicle to grid necessarily. In our case, really, we're talking vehicle to building. Sometimes you see it called V2X. It's basically a charge point which will discharge your car, which sounds a bit counterintuitive, right? Until you start thinking about what you're going to do with it. So here's some photos from it. It's got a great big solar array put in by Ren Energy, or one of the contractors for the company. And here's the box in situ and one of the PV inverters. So they're both doing the same things, really. They're AC/DC inverters, and you can control them. Stuart's here from Verta if you wanted to ask him more questions about the technology, and so on. So, like I said, they're not a power company, right? They sell cars. And this is your guy. This is Ryan. He works selling cars. And this is kind of his day. And he drives a Nissan Leaf, so he's participating. He turns up at work. He charges it up. He uses an app. Sells cars on the phone. He has a bit of lunch, sells cars on the internet, sells cars on the phone. And if he's really lucky, an unsuspecting human comes past and he gets to interact with somebody and gets them in his car, and he sells them a car. They go on a test drive together, and they come back. He sells cars on the internet again, and then he goes home. So there's various points. By the way, this isn't an electric car, of course, because we're talking about net zero, no petrol. There's various points here where we can really let Ryan down with our V2G unit if we're not careful, right? The obvious one is he can't get home. Real trouble. He's not going to plug in again if he can't get home because he's not got enough battery because you've discharged it all because it's suited the grid, right? That's a disaster. But probably more punishing for his goal and the goal of our building is that customer turns up and it's like 4 miles in the car. You go, oh, sorry, mate, we've got to wait best part of 2 hours before we can go test drive this thing. We've not met our goal, right? We've really messed up. So we've got a couple of considerations that we have to make during this person's journey. He's actually spending most of his time inside a big glass box trying not to overheat selling cars as well. So we need to look after his comfort and his ventilation and all of those other things. And it's all energy being used to do those. So what the POC brings to us really is this opportunity to practice all of these things, which we could just about get a head around on a spreadsheet, right? They're quite complicated. Complicated spreadsheet. How do we turn it into reality? And how does Ryan experience it? But technically, for us, it feels like a prediction piece. So we need to be able to kind of have a view on what's going to happen next. And next in these markets tends to be 2 days. Once we've got a hunch of what's going to happen next, we need an optimization layer, what to do for the best. And also, how do we handle that customer turning up unexpectedly? How do we handle with interruptions? How do we recover our optimal strategy? And then once we've worked out our clever optimal strategy, which is all very well and good in the cloud, you've got to get it out into the real world, connect to these assets, make sure that you're talking onto the back of this, it's reliable, does what you tell it to do, and when it does it, it tells you in the right way. So they're the kind of technical challenges that the POC overcomes, and it brings forward a whole host of questions that we're able to think about during the POC. So I won't talk about these in too much detail apart from one, but broadly split into, in the future, what do tariffs and pricing look and feel like for customers? In the future, what do flexibility services look and feel like for customers? Because they've been a really volatile market for the last 6 or 7 years. And net zero stuff. Oh, we've done a lot of carbon accounting, not the same as a net zero strategy. So how energy is really one of the only concrete things that a net zero strategy can report on at the moment, especially if you're a fairly small business. I really maybe pick out a couple of these. So can we tailor tariffs for flexible and non-flexible assets? Can I split your site in half and go, right, all your flexible stuff's over there, your cars are over there, and your IT system's over here. TV over here, Wi-Fi for the internet for the kids, keep that on my flat tariff. That car in your garage, put that on a flexible tariff. Is that possible in a commercial environment? How do customers want to engage with this? I forced Ryan to use an app earlier. He didn't used to have he just parked his car previously, used a key fob. Is that too much of an active participation for him, or does he want to be a lot more passive? Oops. But I think the real one is how can we blend together these technology investments in the bottom right here? How can we blend the good idea to buy a solar panel with the good idea to buy a V2G unit, with the good idea to buy an electric fleet, with the good idea to buy a smart heat pump? At the moment, they're all siloed. And how can we make those investments stick together a lot more closely? I think that's a real challenge that the POC allows us to go and think about. To give us a bit of a framework for how we think about this at Grid Edge, this is the way that we view loads and price. So loads is on the blue line, price is on the green line. We've got some loads, lighting, not very flexible. If they turned all the lights off in here, it would be really annoying for the organisers, right? It's not a thing that can respond to the grid. Electric vehicles doesn't really matter as long as they're charged up enough on departure. Doesn't matter when they charged. Very flexible within the constraints. And there's lots of things that kind of move along this continuum. Pricing, you see some examples of like full volatility. The traders that you'll see using all those screens around the back, right? They're trading on many markets, a very volatile environment. But lots of customers see a flat rate. So there's some mudging going on in the middle, right? There's some smearing of price across the year. And that's kind of, you probably experience flat rate. You're going to have to start thinking about variable rates a little bit more. Sometimes they're triad periods or whatever it is. If you're out of sync on this, the best places to be are lights on a flat rate, electric vehicle on a variable rate. If you're out of sync, you might end up with something that you've spent a lot of money on a big battery, and like it's on a flat rate. That's a terrible investment, right? It never pays itself back. It never able to do that arbitrage opportunity. Or you might have signed up for a really volatile tariff with a particular supplier or two, but you've got no control over when your partner has a shower. So every day you get up thinking, oh, I hope she doesn't have an electric shower at the wrong time, or he, because last time it cost me 300 quid, and it was only half an hour because it was on peak pricing. I don't know. Oh, I'm nervous because I've got no control. Whereas in the EV, I've got a bit of control. So these are really bad places to be for consumers, and these are quite nice places to be. And this is really reflected in the way that we have to then arrange metering. So one of the things that we really learned early on at Norton Way was you really need to get on top of your control and your metering, and you need to have them right in line. If you've got, so these guys are our flexible assets, these two over here on the right. PV inverters are our what we call passive generation, and the grey ones are our non-dispatchable loads. So non-dispatchable loads are the lights, the IT system, you get the picture. If you've got an uncontrollable asset underneath one of your exposed to volatility meters, you can really get caught out. So that's what you want to avoid. This is what the front end's starting to look like. I should have said that the POC's only been going for about three months or so in earnest, and we're kind of getting a lot of the practical wrinkles out of the way. So it's a very early version. Rather than doing a kind of technical demo, I've got a video. So here you'll recognize our base load. This is a kind of Sunday top hat profile. Smartest folk will be familiar with it. Nighttime lighting here. Ryan comes in the day. Nice sunny day. Lots of PV generation appearing. Generation's under the line. Demand is above the zero line, which is here if it's very small. Here's your site duty. So that's a sum of the two things. Obviously, it's not quite a sum. It's actually really influenced by the flexible assets that we have in there that are the same color. So these are our V2G units. And we're trying to meet Ryan's requirements whilst charging when it's cheap, discharging when it's expensive, and making an arbitrage benefit. And we're really having an impact on that blue line. We're really causing it to swing up and down depending on what the vehicles are doing. They're 50% of the load. So the other thing that's really important, I said, was prediction. So having a view of the price for tomorrow and the PV profile for tomorrow really helps us make decisions for now and today and later. How are we going to position our batteries? How are we going to position our vehicles and so on? And I told you at the beginning, it's still all about cost efficiency, right? It's still all about efficiency and keeping Ryan comfortable in his glass box. So there's a hard part of the product which is about basic energy efficiency, modeling the building, helping you run your HVAC system better, knowing when your fans are on, when they shouldn't be on, when they aren't, all the rest of it. And again, that comes with a predictive element that looks off into the future. So this is the AI bit of the company, if you were keen to invest. It's really hard predicting internal space temperature, and we spent a load of time doing it. So let's go back to Ryan just briefly, and I'll close with a last kind of idea. So this is, I think, how Ryan's going to interact with a data system. So forget energy for a bit. Let's just think about data now. So that first data touch point that I get with him is when he uses this app. That's why I forced him to use this app. And he's going to tell me when he's going to leave and how much energy he's going to need. Because I can't predict him. He's an absolute wild card sat in his hot glass box. Sometimes he takes his girlfriend to the cinema at lunch, and it ruins me because I didn't see it coming. I don't spy on his phone. So if he tells me that piece of information, that's my predictive bit, and I can go off and do some optimizing. If he doesn't, really you have to charge him at full tilt all the time, and you lose all of that flexibility. So that piece of data is really important. So whilst he's selling cars on the phone, we're messing with his car. We're charging it at the right time, discharging it at the right time. Whilst he's having his lunch, what are we doing? Well, there might be an event on the local grid which has interrupted us. It's caused us to do a big turn down. We're going to have to sort ourselves out after that. He's selling cars on the internet for a bit. We're back to kind of re-optimizing, bringing ourselves back onto a good schedule, considering the thing that's changed. This customer's turned up, another thing's changed. We're going to have to re-optimize again. Got to worry about minimum status of charge and all the things you'd expect. And he needs to be ready to go home. So as we think about the way that he's touching the energy data system, there's not a lot of touch points there at all, really. But he is generating a little bit of data for us. We knew when he left. We knew when he left and returned. And we knew when he said he was going to leave. And we knew when he arrived. And we're getting some of that off the back of these V2G units, off the back of the Verta units. And we're getting some of it off of a phone, which I should say is also provided by Verta. Not energy data, though, is it? It's not kilowatt hour data. It's not the stuff that we're used to trading and dealing with. So just for my last sort of 3 minutes, I wanted to talk to you about data and where we think it grows in the future and how we think it works in the energy industry at Grid Edge. I'm not going to talk to you about energy data or cars or all that stuff. You can talk to me about that all day. I'm going to talk to you about GPS data and geolocation data and the maturing that we've seen in that industry and that data format as it's grown and grown over the years. So it starts off with this device, right? Where am I? Use a sextant, look at the stars. Been able to do that for thousands and thousands of years. I've got a location, but it's not really a service, right? It's not really helping me out very much. It's only when I start getting questions like, how do I get somewhere else, that you start to see services arrive like GPS, route navigation. This is the first GPS used by the US military. It shows you the nautical bearing to your place that you've not particularly useful. You've still got to have a map and a compass, right? The next services that you start to see, though, as we're moving through this stack here, we're sharing to many, sharing for aggregation. How long will it take me? Google Maps will tell you how busy the traffic's likely to be or predict for you. Whereas when we're just sharing to a few, our service was really quite limited. When we're going to share I'm mistaking the slide. We're going to share look at the next layer of service or value creation that we can create here. We've got a kind of personalization and an optimization layer. How do I get to leads fastest for me? Because I really don't like getting on the DLR with all the Canary Wharf suits, right? Keep clear of that. Given the traffic for me at my journey time for my workplace, show me the best route using this geolocation data. And again, that's geolocation data is swimming around that problem. If you don't like getting on the DLR, you'll end up with an Uber, and you start to see this kind of big disruption of various industries around geolocation data. So remember, we're not worrying about who's going to be the Uber for energy or any of that stuff. Just worrying about what's happening to our data point. Our geolocation point has become the water that's used by these big disruptive companies that you're so familiar with, Just Eats and all the rest of it. They all use geolocation data as if it's air. Really different to how the US military has to use geolocation data back in 1974. And it's that geolocation data point has come on this journey. And I think as we start to think about our energy data, we've got a bit of an equivalent. We've got a half-hourly data profile, which, again, if you think about the trading desk, are very familiar with, ubiquitous in the industry. It's shared, it's gathered by instrumentation, shared to few, shared to TPIs, shared to brokers. When it's aggregated together, you get other types of value-adding services like switching quickly, DSR services, which some of you will be familiar with. Start to push to the next layer up about optimization and personalization, like maybe a bit in the way that some tariffs are being sold. But you got kind of a time of use, right? Your asset, in your building, in your geography, for Ryan at that time. It's a very personalized optimization problem. I think that's where our POC takes us. I think that's just about, if we can get it all singing and working, I think this is about the layer that we can get to. Which isn't to dump on you, Switch, right? An amazing revolutionary business in this sector 12 years ago. I don't think anybody really knows what the next one up is. I've called it co-create, but it's a wild future that we'll have to go and think about. So I wanted to leave you with that little bit about what data means in the energy industry and what data means for optimization, because I hope that you'll see as the POC kind of progresses at Norton Way, these things aren't technological barriers anymore, because we've got one here, we've got one outside. We've been working on V2G for a long time. It's not just about V2G, it's about making these systems smart and interoperable. And we've done a lot of that now. So over to the commercials, right? Over to the business model. It's not a technical barrier anymore. It's not an engineering barrier. I probably waffled on for a bit too long there, but I would like to thank you very much for listening to me. If there are questions, I guess I'd ask you, Tim, to...
Oh, I'll come up at this point.
Is it you, Hayley?
Yeah,
Thanks
I've got the mic now. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks very much. And Buzz.
Okay, you all. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Boz. We're open for questions now. I will come around with the mic if you have any. So I just asked you to raise your hands and I'll move around the room. So first question. Oh, thanks, Tim. I knew you'd have one. Just take this on.
Given the I don't know, half the value of the cars is in the battery, what's your view of being comfortable with third party just discharging, charging it and so on at will as well?
Yeah, I was tempted to put a load of stuff about this in the presentation, but I think so my first view on that is I really think for V2G, for discharge, I think it's probably commercial fleet is probably the entry point. I think the Marubeni case, the Norton Way case, is a bit of a halfway house where it's a kind of a commercial thing, but it's kind of not, right? I think if you think about this is a 10 kVA unit, it's nowhere near the 80 kilowatts that car's able to draw out of the battery in one go. And I think compared to when we started doing V2G stuff in 2013, Nissan wouldn't give you a warranty back then on the car, let alone the battery, if you plugged it into one of these things. So it really has come a long way then. I think probably the answer to that is some combination of leasing company and guarantee. And Nissan have taken that step. I know Tesla have looked at it very seriously. I think the financing bit of it's really important as well, because I think it's a personal vehicle, like I say, is different to a commercial vehicle. But I think it's the second highest cost in most UK households after the mortgage, which is extraordinarily expensive. So I think they need a guarantee is probably the answer. But I don't think that the duty cycling that you're asking it to do here is anywhere near what you're asking it to do when you drive to London on the M1, right? That's really hard work for a battery. But the degradation piece, I think, is still really, really unclear. A really good person to ask about that is Stuart from Verta. So he's familiar with kind of leasing models and vehicles and bits and pieces as well. So he might give you a slightly different answer. I think they're probably the nervousness about finance, I think, puts the UK actually a little bit ahead of a lot of European countries as well, because we've got comfortable with not owning our cars about 5 to 10 years ago. No one really, like, new cars are firstly most like they're going to become electric, but they're not going to be assets that are owned in the same way. I think there's maybe a different issue around the secondary market, which there was a report out about yesterday, actually, which I thought was quite interesting.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions from the audience? Probably got time for one more. Yeah. Okay.
Hi. You mentioned at the end commercials, and pick whichever example you like. But I just some sort of understanding of a scenario and what it would mean to someone commercially or business commercially.
Yeah.
In terms of payback, because what you can tick the green box by just using the electric car, charging it, running it down, charging it. So what's the commercial payback?
Great question, and you're absolutely right. I lazily skipped over it because it's really hard. So I guess I've got a couple of answers. So I want you to take away that it's not just you buy one off the shelf. It's a kit. It's not a kit problem. It's a kit plus tariff problem. So buy them as a bundle. That's the way to think about them, because the tariff, if you think about my quadrant chart, it's the tariff that dictates your risk and your revenue, your risk and your reward, as much as it is the equipment. To give you a proper number, I think most of the V2G reports have either split into something that is dedicated for something called the FFR market, which is where you are basically paid the longer that you're plugged in, and they come out as about £400 a year for a Nissan Leaf sized vehicle for V2G, or they're built around what we're more interested in, which is the within day market, and there you've got a lot more spread, but it seems to be between about £600 and £2,000 over the year, but it's very time dependent. So I think the other bit for businesses to hear is, I think this applies to the auto industry as well, it's not about number of vehicles and whether they're vans or not. It's about duty cycles now. It's about where they go, when, how long are they away for, how long are they back for, how deep does the charge need to be? And you'll hear a little bit about that later on as well. So I think as far as a payback, these are very early technologies. We've worked on 4 generations of V2G now have come under our noses. By far the best. Not perfect. The losses are about 1/3 of the first one that we used. And it doesn't leak, which the first one did. So yeah, some big improvements, but they're still, if you're thinking that, they're not going to be 5-year paybacks for most users on a V2G thing. Where you've got other incentives, I think, are non-value things like reliance or reliability, so not having power cuts, backing up your IT system from your bin fleet or something if you're a council. I think that's, people don't monetize that, right? And there's lots of other kind of novel non-money value in there, I think, that people aren't capturing very well at the moment.